Hey, my name is Steve, but feel free to call me Visions. And today I'd like to take a closer look at God of War 3. Since I'm a huge fan of the series, I of course had to dip into it sooner or later, and for some reason I decided I'd start out with the third entry. Does Kratos' vendetta against the gods of Olympus hold up with its predecessor's success? Let's find out. God of War 3 picks up exactly where its predecessor left off. Kratos, Gaia and a bunch of other titans ascend towards the peak of Mount Olympus to put Zeus to rest once and for all. After an epic opening cutscene that sets the tone of the game and serves as a little reminder of what happened towards the end of God of War 2, it won't take long at all until we face our first major opponent, none other than the mighty Poseidon. In a simply outstandingly staged clash with the god of the sea, we get to experience very early on the differences in scale God of War loves to play with. I mean, you're riding on top of a colossal titan who's climbing an even bigger mountain, fighting a god in form of a multi-headed horse crab sea monster. How do you want to top that? And quite frankly, in my opinion, the game sadly never does. I feel this early on is where the game plays out its trump card, as I truly think the fight against Poseidon is the climax of the entire game. It might not be the highlight when it comes to mechanics and stuff, but in terms of sheer epicness and jaw-dropping moments, Poseidon is where the game peaks. Now don't get me wrong, I'm definitely not saying that the other bosses in the game suck. Let's take a look at Hades for example. While I have to admit that aesthetically I personally was quite disappointed by the god of the underworld, his fight all but makes up for it. Multiple stages and a lot of variation that require the player to respond in a certain way make this in my eyes the best boss fight in the game mechanically. It's also staged very well. For example, that cool chain attack right here. It looks so sick. I mean, what I wanna say is that Poseidon is where the game peaks in terms of presentation, and that it might leave the player disappointed by not meeting expectations it sets so incredibly high further down the line. Yes, chasing down Hermes was unique and fun as well, but comparing it to the sheer epicness of Poseidon, it just falls short. Hercules is a fun fight, but doesn't hold a candle to Poseidon either. Kronos, while being eye candy, had most of the time you just fighting some small dudes while on top of him. But here the difference in scale and overall epicness really helps out, as you're slaying a titan carrying a freaking mountain on its back. After playing through the intro, we find ourselves, in typical God of War fashion, stripped of all our previous might and power, trapped in the underworld once again. After a short dialogue, sassy Kratos receives his trademark blades from Athena, and our main journey begins. Accompanied by a beautiful melody sung by Pandora, we start exploring our surroundings. Even though the original God of War games are all quite linear, the player still gets rewarded when he's not just mindlessly running along the main path, by oftentimes finding phoenix feathers, red orbs and the like, which allow us to further level up our HP and magic bars and weapons. Some of them are very well hidden away, some of them are in plain sight, but overall it just feels kind of fun and rewarding searching and collecting these throughout the playthrough. By progressing through the game, we automatically end up with 4 different weapons that each possess a different magical ability, as well as 3 items we can use at any given time to enhance our combat. But even though each one of these weapons has a wide array of moves, I can't help but feel that at the same time they're kinda redundant, as simply spamming the same 1 or 2 attacks with your default Blades of Exile will most of the time do the job anyways. So while there actually is a very in-depth combat system available, I feel there's barely any reason to use it, as the good old Blades of Exile will slaughter anything in the way of Kratos anyway. Speaking of slaughtering, throughout the game we get to fight a ton of different creatures, most of them inspired by ancient Greek mythology, And while we know a lot of them from previous entries already, there are still some new ones as well. The Chimera, for example. Later on, when firing a ballista, we silently get ambushed by it. The way they made it sneak out of the dark corner is done so smooth and well in my opinion, and you generally don't see it coming. Of course, there's also quicktime events. This is God of War after all. I know a lot of people dislike them for whatever reason, but I think they're still a unique and fun way to creatively finish off enemies, as long as they aren't overdone like in Heavy Rain for example. There's definitely some classics in there, such as ripping off Helios' head and using it as a torch, or the infamous Poseidon eye gouge. This is where I definitely have some criticism. There are a lot of truly well-written lines of dialogue and characters in this game, but on a lot of occasions I really felt the writers chose the easy way out. I know the game's overall priority lies in delivering action-packed gameplay, but I can't help but feel that a few characters in here are as two-dimensional as humanly possible. Let's take Hermes for example.
Lazy mortal!
He's just the most cocky son of a bitch you'll ever come across, but not even the slightest in a good way. His sole purpose of existence is to annoy you. On top of that, his voice actor sounds as if he's been told to use his best stereotypical gay voice voicing him.
So slow. Close, Spartan, but you'll have to try harder.
Helios, who's had like a total screen time of 2 minutes and wasn't even worthy of getting his own fight, has the personality of a potato and is just as annoying as Hermes. And this is allegedly the god of the sun? I think there's a lot of wasted potential here, and the writers or whoever is responsible really took the easy way out by making these two as annoying and pretentious as possible to justify killing them. I'm also not a fan of the whole Pandora thingy. We've seen Kratos killing innocent people every time he's had the chance to, oftentimes in completely unnecessary situations just for the sake of it. And now you want to make him the soft type all of a sudden? Sorry, but not buying it, regardless of his past. I could imagine Pandora was a tool created to make the players sympathize a bit more with Kratos to maybe lie the foundation of the God of War reboot, but maybe I'm reading too much into it and they were just spanning for the trend or whatever. Anyway, I'm not a fan of it and it all just seemed forced to me. But speaking of Pandora, she also had a few nice moments, such as this one for example.
Hope is for the weak, Pandora.
Hope is what makes us strong. It is why we are here. It is what we fight with when all else is lost.
This is what hope delivers, child. You should learn that now.
This really is a beautiful scene that makes someone think and reconsider things in life. Whether you share Kratos or Pandora's view, at least in my opinion. Kratos, of course, is as short-tempered as ever, but drops some good lines occasionally as well, most of them savagely aimed towards the gods of Olympus.
Appearances can be deceiving, Kratos.
So can the children of Olympus. Be quick with your words.
Hades deserved to suffer, though I thought his death impossible.
Olympians overestimate themselves.
And you believe him? That freak has fallen from the graces of Olympus!
That is exactly why I believe him.
So overall, I'm honestly quite disappointed with how a few of the characters were written, but I definitely don't think it's bad per se. It's just, if you compare it to games such as The Last of Us or the new God of War even, it's two different worlds. But seeing as there are some truly great dialogues and quotes in this game, you know the writers had it in them, which makes it even more of a shame so much potential was wasted. Again, maybe it's just me, but coming from the previous two God of War games and its variation of exotic locations, I felt rather underwhelmed by God of War 3, to be honest. The original two games gave us locations such as the Desert of Lost Souls, the Cliffs of Madness, the Bog of the Forgotten, the Fire of Olympus and so on, which in comparison to God of War 3 just pales. Now, God of War 3 has its fair share of unique places as well, but to me personally, the overall standard was higher in the previous games. I don't know, it just felt like I was constantly running around in some dark caves that all kind of felt the same. And it's not like I can't stand dark games or something, because Bloodborne, but yeah, it's probably just subjective, as most things are in life. But since all I'm doing here is sharing my opinion on games, I feel it's worth pointing out. To me, it just felt a little bit too dull and monotone, especially when compared to God of War 1 and 2. But to stay positive, I also really enjoyed some of the locations, for example, the city of Olympia. I really welcomed the change in scenery and seeing some actual sunlight for once. Too bad it was so short. Or the pit of Tartarus looked freaking amazing, but once again, sadly a little on the short side. My favorite area of the game was Hera's Garden though, partly because of the nice puzzles, which I also kind of felt let down upon compared to the older games. I remember them being more challenging. I'm gonna keep it straightforward. The way God of War 3 presents itself is best put into one word: epic. The visuals were top-notch back in the days of 2010, and they still are to this date, thanks due to the remaster. The soundtrack is, as usual, nothing short of breathtaking, and really pumps you up in certain situations. It's always tough to come up with a wall of text when it comes to the musical facet of a game, as most of it is subjective anyways. But I'm pretty sure you won't find many people that dislike God of War's epic symphony of a soundtrack. The only thing I can complain a bit about is that in some parts of the game some audio files seem to be not mixed properly.
I tried to return to battle, but
Without me,
you know I had no choice. You must.
I noticed this 2 or 3 times throughout the game. It's nothing drastic, but it does kinda put you off when you hear it all of a sudden. Now maybe I came off as a little too harsh overall, that wasn't my intention. It's just that the God of War series is pretty dear to my heart, as it reminds me of a period of my life I love to think back to. God of War 3 at the end of the day, even though it slightly disappointed me personally, is still an incredible game that every PlayStation owner should have played. It still managed to snatch an overall 89 points after all, which says a lot about this franchise. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, I'd appreciate a thumbs up, but if you didn't, feel free to dislike and comment on how I could improve. Thanks, and until next time.